Armchair commanders, we call the shots. From our living room thrones where the action's hot. We're the generals of fiction, the masters of war. In silver screen battles with buttered popcorn. Armchair commanders, armchair commanders.
All right, welcome to the Armchair Commanders podcast. My name's John.
And I'm Jack, although I kind of wish I wasn't right now.
I wish you weren't Jack either. And this
Eat
week,
me.
okay, name the time and place. Anyways, this week we are joined by comic book artist and friend of the podcast, Reid Beaman. Reid, welcome.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate you guys having me back on.
It's a pleasure. And for this week, we're reviewing a John Wayne classic. As our listeners at home, we have a little bit of a love-hate relationship with John Wayne around here. So I gotta say, The Searchers, it's one of his bigger title films. It's a highly regarded film, but it's definitely on the outer edges of, I think, what we would consider to be a war film. So how come, what made you go with this as your choice for this review?
Well, I guess for part of it is because like the historical background that like it's set in with everything, even though Ford kind of like moved up the timeline for it, so it coincided more with the end of the Civil War because what was it, 1865 that it said
Yeah.
at the beginning of the film. And then I love the shot, of course it says Texas, and then you see, oh, it's Monument Valley. Texas doesn't look anything like that at all. And I just it's such an interesting story that goes along with the Parker family, like which basically inspired Alan LeMay to write the book The Searchers, and then having I think Ford either read a copy of it or Alan LeMay made it into a script or something like that happened between the two of them, and then it ended up becoming like the movie that we see today. Um, I just liked it for the historical aspect of it, even though the film necessarily doesn't really do it justice to me, at least because so much of it was changed. But I thought it'd be an interesting like historical film to like look at anyway, because it is kind of the turning point between Ford and John Wayne initially, because I think the last film they're going to work on together would be um, The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. I think that's the last film that they end up doing.
Yeah, I think you're probably right about that one.
Yeah.
Which is, I'm surprised they. I think before we get into the John Wayne John Ford relationship, I think Jack, what did you think of this film? Can you tell us a little bit about your viewing experience?
Well, I watched it just last night and I was quite intoxicated. I watched it with two of my dear friends in Discord. And this is one of the movies of all time.
It is a movie.
Fuck, my head's killing me. And yeah, you're looking at me expectantly, so I'm going to come right out and say it. I kind of jokingly, my fucking god.
You okay, Jack?
Hello. Yeah, I kind of realized that I needed to watch this movie by tomorrow, and it was either wake up early or watch it now. And well, I watched it now. Well, then, fuck. Ugh. And yeah, tomorrow's then is today's now, as the saying goes.
It's very profound of you. What who did you watch it with?
Dalton and Joey.
Nice. So what did you think of this film being our token Native American on the show?
Oh, it handled racial relations with such grace and dignity. It was so kind of John Wayne. Yeah, it certainly was a movie.
Thank you for that astute observation. I
I feel bad for
I
suggesting the film now.
this is not the first time we've dealt like I said earlier, we have a love-hate relationship with John Wayne here because he is in so many like classic like must-watch films, and like, as problematic as he is, he does do a good job in quite a few of his roles. Like, he didn't become the megastar he did by being a shitty actor. Um, that being said, he's boy oh boy does he captures a different time very well.
I mean, he he does, but like I don't know, it's hard to get over the blatant racism that's like all over the film. And I know we're going to talk about a little bit of that later too, but like he does give a good performance, like you said in this, especially with what happens to one of the older girls when he comes out of the past and like can't really describe like how terribly mutilated her body was. I thought that was pretty good. I don't think we would actually see him emote more until, to me, I think his best film was The Shootist. That's just to me because like he actually seems like a more, by that point he's not a stereotype. He's more himself in that film, and I guess maybe John Wayne's more comfortable being John Wayne by that point because so much of John Wayne's image was like Hollywood manufactured. That the vision
Yeah,
that we have of him as a man and as a masculine figure, it comes from all these films, but really it's kind of cheesy in a way too that like he's almost playing the same character over and over and over again. And whenever you look at the film, it's John Wayne. He's always being John Wayne in a John Wayne role. And to me, the shootist always felt like it didn't feel like John Wayne. It actually felt like he was actually a pretty seasoned actor by then, even though that was like what his last film role that he had before he died of cancer.
uh have you ever heard of The Conqueror?
Yeah, I've heard of that, and
That
because
was that was I think that was his last role, which it's on our list, and that'll be a fun time whenever we get around to that.
I just
John
he
Wayne
was
as Genghis Khan.
Oh boy.
I don't who cast him as that? Like whose first choice would be like, let's get John Wayne?
I don't know. It blows my mind that Hollywood is still doing that today because I want to say back in like 2011, 2012, they came out with a film called Gods of Egypt or something like that.
Oh yeah, I
And
remember that.
and it had Gerard Butler as an Egyptian god, and I was like, who the fuck made this casting decision?
Yeah, it was very problematic for the casting. Mm.
Just like this film, where our main pro I don't even know if the aptly named Chief Scar um we can't give him like a real Native American name because God forbid.
Yes, cicatresas. That's Spanish for scar, and I knew that before the movie.
What's said so too that with Scar being that the actor that played him was actually German. He was a German American actor, and like when you look at him, I mean, I guess he went out, laid out, and got a really nice suntan because like he doesn't look anything like the actual Native Americans that are in that film, because there are actually real Native Americans in the film.
Yeah, it's weird that they would get actual Native Americans to be in this film and still choose to have the lead, like, still cast a non-Native American to be the lead antagonist, but um also it's 1960s Hollywood, so I guess it's not that surprising. The thing you brought up, the fact that he's a German American actor, I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
But a thing I learned recently, and I don't know, Jack, if you have seen this or if you've heard about it, but apparently Native American culture is like a really popular thing in Germany. Like, like,
Huh.
like they have, like, you can Google it. They have legit, like, full size, like, powwows and get togethers and whatnot in Germany. And it's literally just a bunch of these white dudes dressing up as Native Americans, and basically they're like they're treating it basically like a reenactor hobby, essentially.
Hmm.
And it's so
Interesting.
weird. It's something. It's weird, but you ever get the chance, look up like German powwow, and it'll confuse you.
Hmm.
But
Did not know about that.
I find, I mean, I know we were going to try and push this off, but I think, like, like we've said in a previous episode, like we just have to address the racist elephant in the room. Like, it's hard enough to ignore an elephant, but he's also a racist.
Yeah.
I So I watched this film. This is actually the first time I have seen this film. I've watched a lot of John Wayne movies, but this is the first time I've seen this one. Um, and afterwards, I started like doing, like, I wanted to go into the movie just blind and take it as it was, and then do research after the fact because I didn't want my opinion to be tainted. And a lot of reviews that I read was that this film was supposed to be a purposeful examination of racism in the West. Like, apparently this wasn't meant to be just like, oh, this is Hollywood and we're super problematic and we're just going to be super racist towards Indians. It was supposed to be like like this is how we committed a genocide against Native Americans kind of lens. And I'm not sure if I can buy that, if we're being honest. Um, it's kind of like, have you ever seen the movie Gran Torino?
Yeah.
Gran Torino, I think it's a Clint Eastwood film. I like it. I think it's a great film. But that film is definitely just a vehicle that allows Clint Eastwood to be his actual racist self.
Oh
And
yeah.
I think that that is what this film is also for John Wayne and for a lot of actors of the time, which is like, I get, this movie is supposed to be about racism in like the West and like prejudice towards Native Americans, so that means I get a free pass to say whatever the fuck I want.
I know.
And
It's. Go ahead, Jack.
And John Wayne was a raging racist, even by those times standards. So, man, yeah, he
Yeah,
really jumped on it.
well, I mean, you're not wrong about that, and kind of Ford was to himself at that point in time in Hollywood, and I don't know, like kind of like you said too, John. There's not really an easy way to get around it, especially like there was purposeful like changes into the script from Alan LeMay's novel The Searchers to how it made it on screen to actually make it where Wayne would have the tension with, and I can't remember the guy's name, the one that was like he was a quarter Cherokee and he was still part of the Parker family, and I can't remember what his name was now. Um, but like
The
they,
the the one that John Wayne kept referring to as, and this is a John Wayne quote, this is not me. I don't believe in this statement or believe in its usage. Don't at me, Twitter. The guy that John Wayne kept referring to as blanket head.
yes, and like I didn't even know, like, is that a slang for back then, or was it just something that they Hollywood made up? Because I haven't been able to find anything, at least
I
on
I
my
had to,
end.
I had to dig deep on it, and it is a super. It was a lesser known, like it was a lesser used slur way back in the day, and it just it was like somebody trying to come up with a slur, and it just didn't get like a ton of traction. But blanket head is supposed to reference like Native American blankets.
Uh huh.
But if you do like an Urban Dictionary search today, somebody put in, I don't know if it's accurate or not, but the Urban Dictionary entry for blanket head is just idiot.
Hmm.
But I don't know.
That's so weird as a term, anyway. So Martin Pauly was the name of the kid that was in there that
Right.
Jeffrey Hunter ended up playing that I forgot the name of. But so in the book, Martin's character isn't a quarter Native American at all. He's just a white person in there, but it was changed in the script. And I'm assuming that Ford did it in a way to provide tension in the group because when you watch Wayne, when he comes up and as he enters the house and they introduce Martin's character, even when he's there at the table breaking bread with him and eating, Wayne looks sideways at him and doesn't trust him. I mean, really, in reality, Wayne treats him like dog shit pretty much the entire way through the film, especially when Martin gets accidentally purchases a wife and everything, because then we get to see the sexism of the West in its full glory at that part. And then Wayne's laughing his ass off between the two of them, who Martin doesn't want to be married to her at all.
Right.
So I don't know. It's plus for the fact too of having a white guy just pretend to be Native American up there, and he doesn't even look like he's Native American. Like they could have at least tried to find an actor that looked Native American, but they didn't.
Nah, why would we do that?
I just I don't know. There are a lot of problems with the film, but there's a lot of beauty in the film too. And I know that doesn't negate the racism or
Well,
anything like that.
that is like when me and Jack were text, because we'll text each other when we watch films. If we don't watch them together, we will text each other as we're watching them. Um, and when he was texting me last night or this morning or whatever, I was like, the one thing I can give this film props for is the cinematography. There is some beautiful sets. There is some incredible scenes and shots. So for that, I will give the movie props for that. There's lots of filmmakers who have credited this film for inspiring their own works. And Jack, I hear you laughing. Are you laughing because of George
I,
Lucas's inspiration for this?
no, no, I was laughing because my DoorDasher missed his turn.
Oh,
But anyway, I got to go now to pick up my food, so I'll be back in a second.
of course. Um, so like that was the one that surprised me, but like
Mhm.
upon reflection, that was, I guess, not like, I know artists take inspiration a lot from, other artwork and, transforming it into their own thing, but I never would have guessed that, in Star Wars A New Hope, the storyline where, Luke's aunt and uncle are burned alive on their farm was inspired by one of the opening scenes in this film where,
Really?
you know, yeah,
I didn't know that. Wow.
yeah.
That's
So when the
hmm.
yeah, so when the Comanches raid the like family farm and burn it down, that scene actually inspired George Lucas for, Uncle Owen getting killed
Aunt
in
Beru.
Star
Holy
Wars.
shit, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it so for the problems this film has, like, that's what I mean by I have to give the cinematography props, because it not only is it good in its own right, but it inspired so many other scenes in classic films that, like, you can't ignore it.
Well, I mean, even today, if you look at some of like Robert Eggers filming and like the use of doors, like how Ford used, the door or the window to kind of frame everything, and that was the shot. Like it's beautiful cinematography to like use that, and not only that, but use it to bring us into the story. And then when we leave, the door shuts on Wayne at the end. So it's almost like the family welcomed him in. By him coming home from the war, he destroyed or was part of the family's own destruction. And then the door closed on him because his family was gone and the world shut him out. Essentially, like they had no room or no place for a man like John Wayne, which, a bigoted racist, you know, I don't think anyone's going to have like a bunch of room for a bigoted racist like that, as bad as he was. Because a lot of this film, even though, he has a change of heart at the end, it's like he was getting ready to do an honor killing. Because back during this time, um, pretty much from about the time of the Mexican American War up until the early 19th century, there was a big thing, and it's been prevalent in a lot of West films about white women being taken advantage of by like Native Americans, or they're being tainted by the fact that the Native Americans would come, they would raid a wagon train, they would raid a homestead, and then they would take either the children or the wives, and then they would leave. And by trying to go back and get them, the women and children back, they could be tainted by having slept with a Native American man, even though it may have been by force, it maybe not have been because they could have fallen in love. But it's just this whole film almost becomes like a huge giant honor killing, because like he's so racist and mad at the entire film. All he wants to do is not rescue his niece, but just kill her flat out. And almost at the last minute, he changes his mind and he doesn't want to kill her.
Yeah, like, and you can see, like, initially when this story starts off, it's framed as a, we gotta hunt this group down, get our people back, and wreak our vengeance. Um, but as the movie progresses, we find out, we figure out, like, John Wayne also, like, John Wayne just wants to go on a rampage, period, point blank. Like, there is no other objective other than him going out and killing people. Like, he wants to go out and he wants to kill Comanches. And he also, like, he says, like, one of the lines that stuck out to me in this film is, she's been living as a Comanche for 5 years, and that's not living at all.
Yeah.
Like essentially, like he has deemed her like no longer a person because
Hmm.
of her association.
Yep.
And it it's like you said, like it falls in that vein of quote unquote honor killing, but I think it really boils down to just like I think there could have been a place for like a deeper examination of John Wayne's character in this, because he's at the beginning of the film we see him, he comes home in his Confederate uniform, it's the end of the war. So we have a guy who has just spent 4 or 5 years fighting for the continuation of slavery, was not successful at that, comes home, and now has a reason to essentially go on a war path against another group of people that he deems to be lessers than him. And I think there could have been a very interesting, like, because historically speaking, a ton of people who were in the American South during the Civil War or fought for the Confederacy did go out west after the
Hmm.
Civil War, because the West wasn't technically, like, they were United States territories, but it wasn't technically, states. So that was a way for them to escape the US essentially. I think that that could have been a very interesting lens that they could have explored this through, that they really just kind of glossed over.
Well, they kind of hinted at it because remember when he comes in and the reverend, the judge, shows up and they start talking and he said, "Well, I never turned in my saber." And he asked him what he'd been doing and rob any banks or anything, and he said, "Well, you fit a bunch of descriptions." So I'm like, are we trying to elude the fact that he didn't give up on the Confederate cause and then he became like a highwayman or a bank robber? Because like, I mean, that
Like a
happened.
like a suit like a pseudo Jesse James.
Yeah, kind of like that. And I'm like, well, I would have honestly much rather seen a movie about that than the one we got because that sounds a little more interesting. But I don't know because it alludes to it, but it never really follows through with it. And you're right. You said that he's incredibly angry. He's angry out through the whole film, like when he's like stabbing the dirt and tells the guy that don't ever ask me again to describe it for you or like paint a picture. And then the scene with the buffalo when him and Martin go and it suddenly becomes winter in this film because there's no like real equal way to do time lapse because this was over 5 years. This whole film is supposed to encompass 5 years, and like it jumped around so much, I got lost and was like, "Why is it snowing now?" Because like there's no real clear showing of time in the film except for the letter that Martin writes his supposed fiance. That's supposed to dignify or signify that we're changing time, like it's been a year and stuff like that, and they're still searching. Um, but the buffalo scene, Wayne is so angry at just what happened to
Like,
his, like he just shoots the buffalo for no reason. He's literally killing the buffalo, and he makes comments about it too that he's killing the buffalo so the Native Americans can't have them, and that's their
right,
food
because
source.
that's, yeah, it's their main form
Yeah.
of sustenance, because like they use buffalo for literally everything and anything. um Jack, what'd you think of the buffalo scene?
That stuff actually happened. Killing buffalo for no other reason than to deprive natives of their new food source.
I I read a really interesting book like a year or two ago, and it's called American Buffalo. It's God, I forget his first name. His last name is Ranella. Um, he has that show. Have you ever heard of? I think it's called Man Eater or something like that.
Oh, that's the guy that did it. Okay. Yeah, I've
Let me
watched the
look it up.
Maneater show before.
Um, if I could type. It is by Stephen Ranella, and he's a very well-known big game hunter. He has TV shows and whatnot. But a few years ago, he came out with a book called American Buffalo, and it literally, the premise of it is he got a tag to hunt wild buffalo up in Alaska. And so basically, the book is formatted like each chapter he tells just like a little bit about his trip and experience of going out and hunting a buffalo himself, but then it literally chronicles the entire history of buffalo in America. So
Hmm.
like it starts off from like a scientific standpoint of like this is their evolutionary like chronology, and then it like goes into like their use by Native Americans, and then it goes into like their near extinction and their comeback and like their place in like society today. Like all it's a great book. Uh, you would not think that you could really go that deep about like a cultural impact over like 200 years for a single animal, but you can. But that scene, it's only because I read that book that scene hit me even harder, because this film is made in, I'm presuming it was shot in 61 because it was released in 62. And I mean, even today,
It was actually released in 1956.
56.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the
So it would have
Google
been
box.
filmed in like 55.
Okay, so the Google Box machine was leading me astray. Um, I think no, there's another film I was looking at that was released in like 62 or 63 that I wanted to touch on. That was another Ford film, but we'll get to that. So this is released in the mid 50s, and buffalo today are still, they're not an endangered species, but they're like wild buffalo populations are still incredibly small and thin. Um, most of buffalo and bison populations are captive, like they're on ranches and farms and whatnot. So I don't know. There was something about seeing a scene where like it's the 50s. They're not faking the death of an animal. They are actually shooting these bison. Um, and like if you've ever watched like hunting videos, like these animals drop like they've actually been shot. So like um to me, the fact that they killed multiple buffalo in the 50s at a time when like 30 to 40 years earlier their buffalo population was like triple digits maybe, just blows my mind, like that they would do this for the sake of a film.
Yeah, that part of the
Yeah.
film was actually filmed in Canada. There was a buffalo ranch that was filmed in. John Ford sent his son, I think his son's name was Jack, sent his son up there in a film crew, and they shot that on location in Canada, with a herd of like captive buffalo. And that's how they were able to shoot that scene. So like the rest of it that we see up there with Martin and John Wayne's characters, they're like on a sound stage, and that's just like superimposed with the buffalo and stuff around them. So that's how
Hmm.
they were able to do that scene.
It's kind of like when we reviewed Come and See, and they like actually waxed a cow with like machine gun fire.
What?
Oh yeah.
See, I
Right.
haven't seen Come and See yet. Like I want to watch it, but
We'll go
like
and watch it.
I hear it's pretty tough.
Oh,
We'll go and see.
it's a it's a fucking hard film.
It's
Great.
hardcore. One of the best
So
war movies ever made, in my opinion.
so the first film we ever reviewed was just a 10-minute short called Picadon, and it's about uh, the bombing of Hiroshima. And
Mhm.
then the second film we did it was Come and See, which is about the Holocaust in Eastern Europe. So we were off to a stellar start with our show here with
Yeah.
the happy fun times.
Yeah, I'm waiting for you guys to review Grave of the Fireflies or watching Barefoot Gin,
It's funny you
because
mentioned that.
Barefoot Gin was the. Is
Oh,
that on
sorry,
your list,
continue.
Jack?
Continue.
No, I was just gonna say that Barefoot Gin is based off a manga that the
Yeah.
actual manga creators survived the bombing of Hiroshima, and I've read it, and the film is sad, horrific, and beautiful at the same time. And Grave of the Fireflies, which is loosely like a Ghibli film, is about like the devastation of
Of war, yeah.
firebombing and what war war does to children. And those are two really really hard films to watch.
So,
Especially now, me being a parent, it's even harder.
all right, Twins beat the Tigers. Anyway, last night I was having dinner with just this guy I know, a buddy of mine, and I mentioned that, I'm part of a podcast. We got viewers in the single digits, no big deal. And
Hey, we're double digits now. Okay.
right, yeah. But anyway, and I was like, yeah, we take recommendations, and that was one of the movies he recommended is Barefoot Gen. But I have read a bit of Barefoot Gen. I haven't read the whole thing, but I haven't watched the movie yet. He also recommended Grave with the Fireflies.
I was going to say, when
Yes.
we reviewed Picadon, didn't you say that you were, because you've watched Grave of the Fireflies, that you said you were refusing to watch it again?
I was getting to that, Jonathan.
Sorry.
So there are two movies. There are two movies that I've seen, and I strongly encourage everyone to watch, and I think everyone should watch, but I will never watch again. And those two movies are Grave of the Fireflies and Schindler's List. Yeah. Great movies, though. Great, spectacular, but fuck.
You could be like my wife, who refuses to watch Schindler's List just for the sake of pissing me off.
She won't watch it because just to make you mad.
Yeah. Because
his wife's a shitlord.
Because I'm like, no, you don't get it. This is like one of the top 10 greatest films of all time of any genre. Like, it is a film you have to watch. And she's like, no.
That's funny.
Just because it makes me mad.
Ray Fiennes plays such a good Amon Goth that made a survivor cry.
Yeah, I know, right? Like that was wild. Like hearing about the film too for Schindler's List, about like just how like menacing he was and how it just freaked out the survivors, that he played that commandant so well.
Yeah, it's wild that he actually joined the Third Reich for that film.
Join a neo-Nazi group to prep. Still hasn't gotten rid of that giant swastika on his chest.
Yeah, man.
Thank God Daniel Day-Lewis never had a shoot as a Nazi in the film.
Fucking Daniel Day-Lewis.
I know. Because you guys haven't reviewed Lincoln yet, have you?
No, we
not yet.
That's on our list, but there's a specific group of guys that we want to do that with. So this is the second John Wayne and John Ford team up film that we've reviewed. The first one we did was The Horse Soldiers.
Oh yeah, because you guys were complaining about Andersonville.
Yeah. This could end in death or Andersonville.
Yeah.
Andersonville isn't a place, guys. At least not yet. And we did that with the guys from the Civil Weird podcast, which if you haven't checked out our episode with them, check it out. If you haven't heard or checked out their stuff, highly recommend it. They do some great stuff. But the guys from the Civil Weird podcast actually work, or at least Adam, the like lead host, he works at the Lincoln Tomb.
Oh.
Like that's his day job.
Hmm.
So at whatever point we do the film Lincoln, it's going to have to line up with his schedule, because like we don't have a better person to do that film with than a guy who literally stands around Lincoln's decaying corpse every single day. So
Well, remember too, Lincoln's under a bunch of concrete, so we can't try to like steal his body like they did at one time.
that's what they want you to think.
Yeah. Well, actually, you guys really ought to like do Lincoln and then do was it the conspirators or the conspiracy that was made about like Mary Surratt and everything that happened leading up to the assassination of Lincoln? Because like
Yeah,
it was because you could
so
do
we're
that film.
so sneak peek for our listeners at home. We are currently getting scheduling hammered out with the guys from the Civil Weird podcast. We're going to be doing 2 episodes, one episode on our side of the house and one episode on their side of the house, where we're going to review the recent Apple miniseries that just came out, Manhunt.
Ooh, that'll be good.
Yeah, so there's still a couple episodes that have to come out for that, but in the near future, that is something that's coming up between us. But like I remember like the the way Apple does is they release like the first 2 episodes and then they do like one every week.
Mhm.
I remember like the day the first 2 episodes got released for Manhunt, Adam from Civil Weird podcast started texting me. He's like, "This is the biggest load of horseshit I've ever seen." Like, I'm like, well, I'm glad we're going to have something to talk about. So
Yeah. Mhm.
But kind of going back to the whole John Wayne and John Ford thing, I find like I don't know how much you know about like their relationship with each other, but like it is a as many Hollywood relationships are, as we saw with like the Harvey Weinstein stuff. It was a super abusive relationship.
Yeah.
Like John Wayne really like for a long time looked up to, and he owed a lot of his success to John Ford. And John Ford really like treated him like shit, like pretty much his entire career.
Yeah.
I find it so interesting that like so many of his big roles came with working with Ford, and like things that like really defined him, and especially like defining his character came from working with Ford. But like Ford basically just treated him like a means to an end, if you will.
I mean, he did. I mean, geez, he would even berate John Wayne because it always bothered Wayne that he wasn't in the World War II service. And, Ford, he himself was able to go and be part of the film corps. And, like,
Yeah, he was at Wake Island, I think.
yeah, he was able, and he did a really nice documentary. I mean, he got shot at, and he actually got shrapnel wounds when he was filming the documentary. And he always touted that over Wayne. And, like, he made Wayne cry because, like, he treated him so
I'm
bad.
try-
Yeah, I mean, really, it's noted. And then like he fucking punched like Henry Fonda, or he punched Jimmy Stewart at like one movie they did. It was something about the Navy and something, and like Pappy went up and like punched him. And like the weird thing is they all called him Pappy and stuff like that, like because they loved him so much. But he was such a fucking drunk. He would be dry the entire time through the film. And then once he was finished, like done editing, he would get sauced for like weeks, if not months. He was a terrible alcoholic through all of this. And it really shows that they couldn't keep him under control a lot of the time.
We discussed that when we reviewed The Horse Soldiers, where for that film, not only did John Ford go dry, but he made John Wayne and fuck, why am I blanking on his name? Uh, he was also in Stalag 17. Let me see. William Holden. So yeah, John Ford for that film went to John Wayne and William Holden, probably the two most prolific alcoholic actors in Hollywood in the 50s, and said, "You got to give up drinking too because I'm dry." And like it was so ridiculous that like they legit like they had like an assistant like inject oranges, like use a medical syringe and inject oranges with vodka,
What?
so so that they could not get the DTS, but just in front of.
Wow.
So John Ford be like, "Oh, he's just eating his breakfast," but actually, it's you know just trying not to have a seizure from alcohol withdrawals.
Jeez. Yeah, I don't know how. I really don't understand how Ford was able to function as like going on binges and then like going back and being sober. It just seems crazy. And
Liv-
it also like how it's so not healthy at all.
Livers were built different back in the 40s.
I mean, must have been. I mean, I knew that they were saying because Ford never kept a diary. He never really wrote a book either on his filmmaking. So really, what we have is like limited experiences of like either his son or people that worked with Ford coming out and like talking about working with him and what it was like. Um, I know it's been said that he was definitely a functioning alcoholic. He wasn't the best father in the world. It was said, and there have been other people that have accused him, and it's come out that he maybe was possibly closeted homosexual, like during that time. And they actually supposedly there's a rumor that he made out with Rock Hudson some point, and some famous actress called him doing it, which honestly, that could make sense. I mean, he could have been gay at a time in Hollywood when being gay wasn't accepted. And with him being a family man and everything like that, I mean, who knows, man? That's why he drank himself to death.
Well, I mean, I could definitely see that being uh like like an issue for that time period because like if you think about it, like gay marriage was only legalized in America this century, like
Yeah.
and especially at the time that this film was made. um God, what was it called? I think so you know how there was the Red Scare, which was like everybody's afraid of communism and
Yeah.
whatnot. At the same time or a little bit after the Red Scare, there was a event which is a really kind of like swept under the rug thing, but I genuinely think like there needs to be better education about it. But I can't remember the exact name of it. I think it was called the Lavender Scare or the Pink Scare,
Hmm.
and essentially, like in the late 50s, early 60s, there was basically a nationwide purge of like ousting suspected uh, people who were gay, bi, what have you, from like government jobs, from military service, like all that stuff. Like, not that it was really socially acceptable to begin with, but like there was a real big push to like to further demonize that subgroup. Um, so like I could definitely see like during this time period if there was an accusation like that, like
Hmm.
that would be a super big deal for him, and
Well, I mean,
especially or continue.
no, go ahead. I was just going to say you're right about that because Ford always introduced himself as like, "Hi, I'm John Ford. I make westerns." That's always how he introduced himself. Is that he made westerns, and really when he started out his career making westerns weren't popular, but Ford was the one that popularized the western. And that's why so many westerns we have now fits this same kind of narrative iconography that we see in the Searchers that'll eventually be carried out through the rest of cinematography. And I mean, really, with the sweeping vistas and just the shots alone, a lot of it, I mean, I don't think we would have Dances with Wolves without having the Searchers. and I don't think we would have Unforgiven without The Searchers. I think it's just it kind of goes back to the core of like Western filmmaking. Yeah, it's got terrible depictions of Native Americans, and John Wayne is racist as hell through it, but the film really, I don't know, it broke or formed the foundation of the modern Western of what we have now, essentially.
I would have to agree with that because you know, West. It's kind of a shame because like westerns are a. I would say they're making a comeback or they're making a resurgence. They're becoming more popular, but they definitely receded from pop culture for a solid chunk of time, like late '90s, early 2000s. Like we didn't really have any like major Western works that at least
Yeah.
I can't think of off the top of my head. It wasn't the go-to genre. Um,
I mean, we did get that really kind of interesting 310 to Yuma remake with Christian Bale and Russell Crowe.
yeah, I think the issue with that is because we have the class. You said this is kind of forming the mold for like the new genre of Western. You know how like comic books had the golden age and the silver age and like there's different ages to that particular art form.
Hmm.
I think this is it's similar to this. The problem with it is that you have this film that's bridging the gap between two different forms of the genre, but it maintains the biggest star from the old days, which is John Wayne. And I think that's why it's easy to get lost in this film because John Wayne, him as an actor or as a character in film, he is almost always he is a man's man. He's a macho man, and he portrays this like uber patriot kind of mindset or mentality. So like when people go and see a John Wayne film in this time frame, they're looking at a guy who's portraying a character, and like in pop culture, you're getting this influence of like, even though he's playing different characters, and you should be using your cognitive abilities of saying, "Oh, this is a film. I need to critically think about this." Realistically, you know, films are films. Lots of people just go to films to be entertained. What they're seeing is here is our gold standard or our epitome of what it means to be a red-blooded patriotic man's man, and he is calling his 1/8 Cherokee nephew a half breed and is using every you know derogatory term in the book in this fucking film.
Yeah.
And we can make the argument that like, oh, it's supposed to show how bad racism is and this is how we committed genocide. But I think a lot of people in that time are going to be like, ha, yeah, John Wayne's killed people, you know. So it's a it's a dangerous choice putting him in a film if that is your goal, is to like, if you're trying to make a statement, that statement has a high likelihood of being washed out because of his presence.
Yeah. I mean, that's true. I mean, what do you think, Jack?
Oh boy, yeah, there's a lot to unpack with this movie, and certainly a lot that could be said about masculinity and race relations back in the 50s. Blanket head. Yeah, I hadn't heard that one until now.
I guess
See, I have heard of wagon burner and bush lurker. This blanket head's
I
a new one.
I hadn't heard of those two. Um, I really I I'm kind of failing in my derogatory terms department because I really was only aware of like Indians, but spelled with a J, or the the recent football team that had to change their name.
Mm.
But other than that, I wasn't really up on
Ooh,
Native
yeah.
American. I wasn't up on Native American slurs. Although I recently came across, like, I'm a big punk rock fan. Uh, and there's a punk rock band called Dead Pioneers, I think. Yeah, there's a punk rock band called Dead Pioneers, and it's a Native American punk rock band. And I've enjoyed their music, but they have a song called Bad Indian where they literally list off like every derogatory term in the book
Hmm.
for natives. So I was like, oh, this is informative, delightfully racist, but they get to say it, their words. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm just a pasty white guy. I don't get to be the word police. I can be the word police for myself, but
Well, I think you even hit on it too when you're talking about like the blatant racism of the film, like when he calls them Comanche, or when they say Indian or Injun, and referring to the native people that were there. But I mean, they legitly had, it's like where Monument Valley is. It's part of it was actually on a Native American reservation, and
yeah, it
I
was the Navajo, I think.
okay. So when you look at the film, they actually incorporate some Navajo weaving patterns in with the Comanche weaving patterns as well that we see in the trade scene. So that's actually like what we can see when they're doing the wife trading in the hat and stuff. Um, they mix that together, and they kind of did the same thing with the clothing that they're wearing, especially in the chase. That they're using a lot of Navajo mixed with the Comanche there, and for the Navajo that were actually there when Ford got done filming, because he was so generous in everything that he did. God bless John Ford, that he basically let all the Native Americans there strip the wood and the nails from the sets. Because think about it, they're in the middle of Arizona in the desert. There's hardly any trees around there, so wood was really scarce on that part of the reservation. So when Ford set up the filming locations, they had to basically build a road there to wherever he wanted the locations to be shot at, build the homes, build any of the farmhouses that they couldn't build that wouldn't be built on a stage sound set back in Hollywood. Whatever was physically built at the end of the filming, um, the tribes basically went and pulled all the nails out, took all the wood, and used it in their homes, or used it
Hmm.
in like making like new like tribal buildings there on the premises. So it's just really, I don't know. I have mixed feelings about the film a lot, especially like finding out too that at the end of it, like supposedly they made John Ford a blood brother or whatever that means. I know. It was in one of the research books that I was reading for this that
Okay,
said he.
you know what? Their prerogative to do that. You know.
Well, I mean, they did it as a thank you to him, and like John Ford felt like he thought he really, I guess, gave a different interpretation or view of Native people. I don't think he did. I think what he did is he played into a racist stereotype that had been persistent in America. And all that he did was just further make it so it's more of a stereotype. It's a more thing that we kept seeing. I mean, there's a really good documentary called Real Engine, and it talks about Native Americans in film. It's a wonderful documentary, but it actually talks about what the effects of these John Wayne movies a little bit were on some of these kids that grew up on reservations, that like they identified with the Native Americans in the film. But the thing is, they were rooting for John Wayne to kill the Native Americans, which maybe represented their tribe or another tribe that was adjacent to them. But they were still rooting for John Wayne. So it's it's weird. It was weird to listen to them talk about it, and it's weird because a lot of scholars have studied it too, especially with the searchers. Like they got a group together, and they had native people and regular citizens, and all of them identified with John Wayne's character. They didn't identify with the native people that were being depicted in the film. They identified with John Wayne, which is super bizarre.
Hmm.
Like when you think about it, and I guess I don't. It must be the time. It has to be that some way because it just seems so wrong.
Jack, can you, like, as somebody who is of native descent and who's lived in like proximity to the reservations in South Dakota, like, can you talk a little bit about like your initial like upbringing or like your like understanding of like John Wayne and whatnot, like as a youth? And while you do that, I need to go use the restroom real quick.
Uh, yeah, my dad is a huge John Wayne fan, which is weird because it's through that part of my family I get the native descent. My, my dad's just an interesting case altogether. And yeah, the reservations are just, well, where do I even begin with that? Basically, open air prisons that their ancestors were cordoned off to by the government. And there's the boarding schools. My dad personally knew 3 of our family members that were forced there. Basically, concentration camps.
Jesus.
Yeah, it's something. It worked.
And you're talking about with the ones that were run by like the Catholics and stuff.
The very ones. So to say that I have an complicated relationship with religion is kind of an understatement. One of the least religious people you'll ever meet. Where was I going with this shit? Worked on the reservation quite a bit when I was a social worker with DSS. I was a social services, an intern and then a social services aide. And out of the 100+ kids I worked with, a grand total of 1 of them was white. That's
Wow.
yeah, interesting. Natives are about 10% of the population where I live, yet they were almost exclusively my clientele when I worked for social services. Yeah. Welcome back, Jonathan.
So I have a question for you. I have a question for you, Jack. So the kid that you had that was the white only kid, was he adopted or was he like an extended family member that got like taken into the reservation? Because I know it's a little there's certain laws and stuff and it's really weird
Oh,
about like who can and can't live on the reservation.
It's just like this movie. He was taken during a raid, and they decided to raise him as his own. Not really. He, the,
Right.
so he wasn't. That was when I was working in Pier for the same job. He was from some other town, and his mom was a shithead, and his neighbor was creeping on him. So we were like, okay, no, you can't be a mother anymore. And we took him in, and I had to drive him all the way from Pier to Sioux Falls. And his mom warned us, like, oh, he's such a bastard. He's he's annoying. He won't shut up and blah blah blah. He was an angel. Really, really liked ambulances and whatnot. And I basically had to drive him to the children's home, or I guess what could be crudely called an orphanage. And he was like, "Where are we going?"
Jeez.
Towards the end of the trip, and I didn't know what to tell the kids, so I said, "It's a surprise." And then, yeah, I never saw him again. I wonder how he's doing.
That kind of makes me like to move slightly past the racism conversation, because I think we've beat that horse to death. Was anybody else confused by the character of Debbie, how she went from being like, even though this is a passage of 5 years in time, she went from being like an 8-year-old to being like a 20-year-old woman?
Yeah, that was weird.
I think that was the confusing thing, like really confusing as far as the time lapse goes for me.
Well, and then the guy that she chose, Aaron Edwards, who was played by Walter Coy, like, he had the most punchable fucking face. Like, in the whole film. Like, one of my favorite parts was the fist fight that him and Martin got into, especially when the fiddle, they're like, "Well, whose fiddle's this?" And he's like, "Here's your fiddle back so you could play music." And they went back to punching the shit out of each other. And like, she was over there creaming in her pants because like she was excited these two men are fighting over. It was weird. Did anyone else think that was weird?
I thought the whole love, like, I get it, like you got to get the the lady butts into the movie seats, so you need to have a love story. But I don't know about you, Jack. I thought the whole like love story was really kind of crudely shoehorned into this movie.
Yeah, it wasn't the best. It's kind of forced.
It's, for me also, it was hard to understand because, like, I don't know if you caught this, but so the first time that we see Martin and Laurie see each other in this film, they're like, they're very playful with each other. So like we establish that they have the relationship with each other, and she's like, but she makes a statement, "I haven't seen you in 2 years." Okay. And he makes a statement like, I nearly forgot what you look like. So it's been a long time. But they love each other. Okay, like, I get it, long distance relationships, and apparently in this fucking part of the world, there's only one home for every 3,000 square miles.
Yeah.
I want to believe that it was a little more heavily populated, because like when they have the funeral scene after Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru get burned to death, like, they have like an entire town's worth of people, but there's no fucking town that attends that funeral. But anyways, and the same thing for the wedding. They have like dozens and dozens of people for the wedding scene, but you're like, where the fuck did they come from? Because we never see a town anywhere in this movie. Like,
They busted in.
Yeah.
Yeah, they managed to catch the flight just in time.
As Jack would say, imported. But I'm like, okay, and we see them being playful with each other and joking around and all that kind of stuff. We can see that like building, kind of romance, if you will. And then he leaves, and the next time they like communicate with each other is the letter scene, which, this is where we get the like, oh, this is a serious passage of time. And he comes back 5 years later. So this dude has seen this woman once in 7 years. And he comes back on the day of her wedding and is supposed to be like, "I thought you loved me." I'm like, really? And to your point, where she's like, she's all excited because these two dudes are fighting over her. It's like, the fuck do you care about this guy?
I know.
You saw him once in 7 years and you had one letter from him. He might as well just be some random ass like pen pal.
Yeah, I don't. The whole fist fighting over her and then the wedding thing, and at the end they still got together was weird. It just, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said it's, for the time, give something to the ladies that they'll enjoy, and let's add this to the film because I mean, really, they didn't need that. I mean, they didn't necessarily need it. It just could have been the whole film about John Wayne and Martin going around like trying to figure out where Debbie is and not finding Debbie, and then eventually finding Debbie and almost killing her, and then not killing her. That
It's
could have been the whole movie.
yeah. It I think the love story in this film very accurately represents the character development issues just in general. Because this entire film, like take John Wayne, this entire film, we just see him want to kill people. He wants to kill
Yep.
Comanche, and then we find out, oh, he wants to kill Debbie because she's quote unquote tainted.
Hmm.
And then at the very end of the film, when you think he's going to kill her, he's like, lifts her up like she's a child again. It's like, let's go home, Debbie. And it's like, where the fuck did this character development come from? Like, what changed his mind? Like, when did John Wayne suddenly become an okay guy? Like,
I don't know. To me, it's too abrupt, and I mean, and really, you're supposed to kind of tell in John Wayne's facial features that like he's changing, but what? But what brought about the change? She's literally running away from him because she's scared of him. And then as soon as he grabs her, he says, "Oh, let's go home." What? Who would want to go home with him? Is he going to murder you halfway before you get there, or is he just going to shoot you in the back of the head when you like turn around? So I don't know.
or
It's such a
or
leap.
even or even the take even Debbie for example. She's kidnapped at age 8 or whatever. She lives with the Comanches for
15.
except yeah. Which wait, I thought she was a little girl.
Oh, she was 8, and then she grew up to 15,
Yeah,
right? Okay.
that is what the story says, but she looks like she's 20.
She looks like she's 24. Yeah, she's
Yeah,
old. She looks way older than what they're describing.
yeah. I was like, why does this 15-year-old have crow's feet? Um, anyways, um, the first time, so Martin talks to her when they finally find her, and she's a teenager now. She's like, I prayed you would come every day, and you never did. And now these are my people. I don't want to leave. And then later on, he comes back to get her again, and she's like, "Oh, thank you for coming and saving me." And it's like, where the fuck was this reaction the first time you saw him?
I
Like,
know.
like where in this story did you get your change of mind? Because this, like you said in the beginning, there's a lot of there's not one like there's a lot of inspired by in this
Yeah.
film of like singular stories from the West that this movie is pulling upon. Like I think like a good example with Debbie is one person named Olive Oatman, who she became like a very well known person in the West because she was I can't remember if she was either taken or sold as a kid. Uh, lived amongst I forget what tribe, but she lived amongst Native Americans and was there long enough that she got traditional face tattoos of that particular tribe. And like she became like later in life like a sideshow act as like the white woman who lived among the natives, stupid Wild West bullshit,
Hmm.
road stuff. But like in interviews with her, like at the time that she finally left that group, she's like, she's like, I see myself as being a member of them. Like So like I was totally okay with that aspect of Debbie's story. What I didn't
Right.
get was like at the end when they go to rescue her, part two, Electric Boogaloo, and she's like, "Oh, thank goodness!" It's like this doesn't make sense.
Right. Well, I think a lot of it, um, I'm trying to remember to, because I'm gonna probably screw it up with the, because we're talking about Comanches here, but it's not Is it Comanche or Apache that means the people? Because I'm like it roughly translates to that in English, and what I mean by that is because how the film is supposed to depict, because let me just go back because it's supposed to depict, this will make it a lot easier too for historical aspect of it. So essentially Alan LeMay, when he wanted to write the Searchers, he used 6 different accounts of being abducted, if not taken, by Native Americans. So two of the things that he drew from was Rachel Parker Palmer and her cousin Cynthia Ann Parker. Cynthia Ann Parker is probably one of the most famous women that you have, especially if you're from Texas. Um, so what happened to basically to Rachel and to Cynthia, which would lead into the Searchers, is that on the morning of May 19th of 1836, a band of Comanche, they came over a hill towards basically the front of the fort, which was called Fort Parker at the time. They ultimately entered the main gate of the fort, and what came to be known as the Fort Parker Massacre happened. Some of the men escaped, most of them died inside and outside the fort. 5 settlers were captured, 5 settlers were killed, and then they were each basically separated. So what was happening at this time is that the Comanche tribe didn't matter. It didn't really they didn't really care if someone died or if they were killed in battle. They would try to replace that member. So and it didn't matter to them if they were white or if they're from Mexico. They would bring them into the tribe, and they would eventually, over time, be treated like one of the tribe. So what happened is that Cynthia Ann Parker and her younger brother John were taken by one band of Comanches, and that Elizabeth Dunty Kellogg and Rachel were taken by another band. So what ended up happening is like Rachel spent like 18 months, or if not longer, with the Comanche, and then she was finally basically rescued. And it would take much longer for Cynthia Ann Parker to be rescued. And when she was rescued, she wanted to go back to the tribe because she eventually, um, her and her daughter Sunflower, they would die um, early on. And I want to say they died of tuberculosis. Um, but it's just really interesting for using that as like historical context for the film itself, that you can kind of see where Alan LeMay was like pulling this information from to make this compelling story. And then it's like Ford got a hold of it, wanted to change the time, so he bumped it, from when it happened in 1838 and moved it to like 1865 or whatever after the Civil War. So, I mean, people out in the West were still back then, they may have been captured, they probably still were, but it wasn't like how the film portrays it to be. That she was a captive and she was forced to like make love and like become this, you know, this other man's wife. When I'm sure sometimes it happened, but not all the time did it happen that way. And not all of them were they all treated badly by the tribe. Some of them were, some of them weren't. So it's just I don't know, it's just I don't it's hard to really say because I read historical accounts and it just varies. like
Right.
everything else,
So like when you suggested this film, I like I like I said, I went into it blind, but after the fact, like it presents itself as like first and foremost as a Western, but it presents itself as like an Indian Wars adjacent
Yeah.
film. And typically speaking, when we think of the Indian Wars, we, you know, at least American history wise, we think of it as being, part of the westward expansion post Civil War. We think about, major events like the Battle of Little Bighorn, and we generally associate it with like actual U.S. forces. Like obviously there is, you know, incidents between settlers and natives and whatnot, but like
Hmm.
generally when we think about the U.S. Indian Wars, we think of like, you know, federal troops, going out and committing massacres. Um, this film, it's weird because the events that this film draws upon is obviously pre-Civil War, and it's not something I really looked into or had really any knowledge of before this film. But apparently, there's a subsect like there. This conflict is actually more aligned with a conflict called the Texas Indian Wars,
Yeah.
because obviously Texas was originally a Mexican state, then it was its own thing, and then it was a U.S. state, then a Confederate state, then a U.S. state again. Um, but like Texas and what used to be northern Mexico territories, like they were essentially having their own version of the Indian Wars going to the beginning of the 1800s up until the late 1900s,
Right.
which
Well,
it
plus,
which is it's interesting and weird to me to think that we have this entire sphere or this entire sub conflict in relation, because like the Texas Indian Wars are also going on at the time of like Texas independence, and like you think about the Alamo, you're like, oh, the what's going on in the world right now is Texas is fighting for independence against Santa Ana and Mexico. But at the same time, like Mexico is also dealing with, you know, the Native American groups that are portrayed in this film as being antagonists to, John Wayne. So it's a weird like interlacing of stuff.
well, here's to put it in context too. So the Battle of the Alamo was in 1836, and that was in February of 1836. The Fort Parker massacre that happened, that the Searchers is based roughly on, happened May of 19th of 1836. So that's the same year. So the same year the Alamo happens in February, in May there's the Fort Parker massacre. Now we're still several years away from the Mexican American War, which was 1846 to 1848. So think about that. Like, so we're still several years. This is 1836, and we've got almost 10 more years to go before we get to the Mexican American War, which is crazy.
Right. And like during this entire time, like our primary, at least in the eyes of the United States, like the primary adversarial foe is Mexico.
Yes.
Like throughout all of, early United States history, like Native Americans have always been seen as like they they are they are viewed as an antagonistic group to the United States, but I, it doesn't really seem like they are a primary like quote unquote enemy until post Civil War, when we're doing our manifest destiny. You know,
Yeah. Which is really interesting too, because a lot of westerns don't cover either. That most people in the West actually spoke what's called pidgin, which is roughly it's a version of Spanish, English, and a mix of very Native American dialects that were used to communicate. Because when you think about it, so much of this involved Mexico that you had to be able to speak to the people that you interacted with on a daily basis. So like there should have been way more Spanish in like a lot of these westerns that people were speaking, especially back then. I always thought that was really interesting that like it's never really touched on at all, especially when we get around Texas and down into like Arizona and like California. It's just like there should be way, way, way more Hispanic speaking languages that's like appearing in westerns, anything that's set around that time period.
Well, like we get a little bit of, I don't know, it's poorly done, but we get a little bit of that in this film where like, middle of the film, John Wayne starts translating Comanche for Paulie because when he's got his wife that he doesn't want for like 3 days, he's like, she says her name is this, and it's like, wait, when the fuck did you learn Comanche?
I
Like,
know, yeah.
but that makes like that historical context that you brought, where it's like, yeah, you gotta know a little bit of everything in order to make it make sense.
Well, I guess, because he was growing up, surrounded with one other house like 1,000 miles away from like where he was living. So of course he would have to learn the language of the people he randomly met walking around his barren ass landscape. I don't know.
I
I can't imagine with the film when it came out, just someone sitting in Texas being like when the film opened up and says Texas 1865 and someone going, fuck that, that's Monument Valley. That's not fucking Texas.
Wow,
Because
Texas
like
looks a lot like Nevada and
it's got this
Arizona.
beautiful opening, but like and it says Texas 1865 and it's like Texas doesn't fucking look like that.
I don't even remember what the fuck we were talking about.
I literally said something about like that Texas didn't look like Arizona, and that's
Oh yeah,
when we got kicked off.
I can confirm because I took a trip down to Arizona literally a couple days ago, and when I came back, I watched this movie in order to be properly prepared for this episode. And when I was watching, I was like, man, Texas looks a lot like Sedona.
What? See, the funny thing is too is like I've never been to Texas, but I've driven
Well, you're
from Las Vegas, Nevada to the southern end of the Grand Canyon, so I at least know what that part of Arizona looks like, and it sure as shit doesn't look like Texas.
well, you're better off for it. Texas is. Eh. I'm sorry to our 3 Texas listeners, but and I say that as somebody who, like, when I graduated college, I spent the better part of like a year and a half trying to get employment in Texas, because me and my wife thought that like that was the place to be. Uh, we were originally looking at like the Denton area, which is north of Dallas Fort Worth, but
Death to Denton.
death to Denton. Um, my people do not wish death to the city of Denton, but a swift and crushing football defeat would be great. Um, but I've seen a lot of other Texas communities, and my God, just you know, all I have to say is if you've ever been to Wichita Falls, Texas, you'll understand why Texas is not worth living in.
Well, technically, I can't go to Texas. One of my exes is from there.
Ah,
Yeah,
I,
it's just like that song. All my exes live in Texas. Yeah,
I thought
Ah,
you were.
yes.
I thought Texas forever. Fuck.
we're gonna really piss off the 3 people you have from Texas.
Oh, what are they going to do? Go on a 5-year revenge tour to find me?
Oh, that just pissed me off.
Hopefully,
I'm gonna kick your ass.
I don't know. Sorry, Texas, but you suck. So sorry.
I will say, is anybody else excited for the King of the Hill reboot?
I mean, I am.
Me and
Curious.
me and
I'm
Jack
hesitant.
were huge fans of the OG show.
Well, I mean, what are they going to do now, though, that the guy that plays Dale's dead?
So apparently, Johnny Hardwick recorded one season's worth of dialogue
Mm,
for the reboot. So maybe I saw like an internet theory that I really hope they do, which is like 50 or 60-year-old Dale fakes his death at the end of the reboot season, but like leaves a note that's like uh tell Joseph's real father to look after him for me.
mm. I mean, that would be interesting. I'm kind of wondering, though, if they're going to like focus more on Bobby and like Connie and like everything that happened with them, because that's what I'm interested in. So, because it would be kind of interesting to see like what became of Luann and like what's Peggy up to now, because and like would Hank ever like get mentally like Cotton, like how Cotton was? I don't know, but
No.
like it's just
Hank
interesting.
Hank doesn't have it in him to
Well,
be Cotton Hill.
well, he's got knees, so you know that's something that Cotton doesn't have.
Yeah, I know you wanted a son.
uh,
I miss Cotton. That's so I'm almost done on my right arm. I have my like family history sleeve. Um so I have like a tattoo to represent like every part of like different parts of my family that have, served in one capacity or another
mhm,
for like the United States. I'm about to start my left arm, and that's going to be another sleeve in the same style that I've been working on, but that's going to be all pop culture.
that's cool.
And I already know what I'm going to do for like my King of the Hill, which is I've found this Flash design in American traditional, and it's Cotton Hill as the Grim Reaper, and in a scroll underneath it, it says "Killed 50 men."
uh, that's funny.
It'll either be that or it'll be Dale doing his like pocket sand.
Yeah, I mean, because that's now even like becoming the meme with like with Mufasa. It was like with pocket sand, like, and even like with Darth Vader too. Like it's everywhere now on the internet. Uh,
It's it's funny because uh I mentioned my wife earlier. Like she is absorbed. Like she doesn't watch King of the Hill on her own, but she's absorbed enough of it because King of the Hill is my like background TV show. So
mhm,
like
It's my
whenever I
comfort
just
show.
whenever I want something on the TV, but I'm not like focused on it, that's what I have on.
right.
Um, one of my favorite things that Dale does is whenever he does something like dramatically or goes to like do some sort of action, he's like, "Sha sha sha," and like I will do that all the time. Like when I'm cooking, I'll be like cutting an onion, I'll be like, "Sha sha sha," or like I'll like if I throw a pill at my wife or something, I'll yell that. And
Mhm.
like the other day, she's like, "Don't shish shaw me." Um. So what are you drinking, Jack?
Meller Yeller.
Meller Yeller. It is early in the day. Not to mention you did your drinking for this film last night. So
Yep. Boy, howdy, I sure did, and I'm paying for it now.
Reid, you
But
got
I
any?
haven't thrown up yet, so I'm not
It's too
completely
early.
hungover.
Do you got any non-alcoholic beverages on deck?
I literally have water, and the funny thing is, I ran downstairs before this, and I grabbed like a Gold Peak sweet tea, and I think I left it on the kitchen table. So it's probably like, I mean, it's probably
Warm.
like, yeah, it's room temp now. It's gonna be so pleasant to drink after all this.
I so I went to a local coffee shop, uh, and I go there literally for one reason. It's because they have it's made up in Commerce City, which is north of the Denver metro, but they have it down where I live. They have a thing called Whiskey Barrel Coffee
Hmm.
on tap. So like I get it as like a nitro cold brew situation.
Mhm.
And basically it's coffee beans that's roasted using wood from retired whiskey barrels.
Oh, that's awesome.
So it gives it a nice little flavor. So
Hmm.
that's what I'm having as a iced nitro cold brew whiskey barrel coffee.
Is that why you're wearing the shawl?
No, it's because it's fucking cold in my house.
It's like it's 85 here today.
So for our listeners at home, you might have noticed we didn't have an episode last week. I was dealing with a fucking water pipe that burst at my house. So um, consequentially, uh, we also went without heat for a little bit. So
Oh
I'm in the
shit.
process. In the process of getting the house warm back up. So that's why I'm wrapped up in my. I actually got this. You mentioned the John Ford and his oh so graciousness of letting the Native Americans keep set pieces. I got
Mhm.
this blanket from a Navajo side of the road stand made out of wood pallets.
Huh, that's cool.
So
That's how you know it's legit.
Hmm.
yeah, I only had to trade one wife for it. Miranda's so pissed.
Good deal. Yeah, I'm sure she'll understand.
It's a good blanket. You can see it.
I mean, it looks pretty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it looks soft.
It's more scratchy, kind of like a serape, but
Hmm.
it's warm.
That's good.
I
Is it made of wool?
honestly I don't know.
So,
But on to rating this film before we do our Rotten Tomatoes, Jack, or what do you think we should rate this film out of?
Eye patches. Because John Ford had an eye patch.
iPad. Hmm.
Did
I'm
Jack?
curious. Hi, Jack.
it's those fucking Texans that are sabotaging this.
Welcome
God
back,
damn it.
Jack.
Jesus Christ.
Man, the Comanches really don't want this episode out.
They really don't.
Ugh.
Uh, Reid suggested eye patches. My personal suggestion was going to be bathtubs because the bathtub scene in this movie really seemed kind of out of place. Uh, Jack, do you have any suggestions for? It's when we first see. I see the confusion on your face, Reid. It's when
Yeah,
Lori
I'm
and
trying to
Paul.
remember it. Yeah.
It's when Lori and Polly are establishing that they're like giddy little kids who are in love. It's like,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay.
otherwise, Jack, do you have a suggestion for a 1 to 5 rating?
1 to 5 cyber attacks from Texas Stan trying to sabotage our podcast operation.
You know what? I'm down with that. 1 to
I,
5
I
Texian cyber attacks.
I rate this film 1 cyber attack out of 5. Because god damn it, I guess I got to throw a couple peanuts that way because this did inspire Star Wars and shit, and it did have some admittedly good cinematography.
All right, Reid. 1 to 5 Texian cyber attacks.
Jeez. Maybe 3 with a littlest yeehaw at the end. But like, just like what Jack said, really mostly for the cinematography, like for the beauty of it, and how much that's like transcended through the years and other film and other filmmakers and such. Um, Historically accurate, 0. But I mean, I don't know. And I guess because like how racist John Wayne could be, I guess you know you got to give its I don't know 3 stars for racism, John Wayne.
All right. I'm going to split the difference here. Like I was shocked when I read this, but this film was actually one of the first 25 films selected for preservation by the National it was either the Library of Congress or National Archives. So they have a vault of
Hmm.
they have a vault of critical pieces of film that they set aside to be permanently saved just in cases. And this was in the first batch of films that they decided to set aside because it was culturally significant. I of John Wayne films, this is not my favorite. I much prefer. There are plenty of John Wayne films that I prefer over this. Like Jack said, cinematography is beautiful, but also like the acting in this is just kind of bad. Like the amount of times we see a person just like over the top, like raise like a hat over the head and like slam it into the ground, like, oh, I'm so mad. Like it's just, eh. But because of cinematography, I will give it its points for that. So I'm giving it 2 Texian cyber attacks.
Well, +2. Remember with Ford, he did everything in one take, because he was definitely afraid of the studios getting any involvement in his editing process. So that's why he normally only did the first take, and that was it. That's why you have so many over the top type scenes because that's what the actor went with the first time that they shot, and then it never went beyond that.
Yeah, there's a couple of scenes that he should have tried again.
I
Um,
mean, yeah, probably the when Ward Bond fell off the horse into the river, and then when they lifted up the rock and there was the dead Comanche underneath, and you could totally see him
Yeah, it
breathing.
was very clearly
Yeah, they
breathing.
really should have
That
gone
part
back and
really
fixed that.
confused me.
well, he wasn't breathing after John Wayne shot him again, so
Yeah. Well, and then like they dropped the rock on him, and like I was like, how heavy is that? Like I hope like the guy underneath like didn't get
and
hurt from that because that rock did look kind of heavy.
and it broke after they dropped it again. Uh,
Oh, it did. I didn't even notice that.
yeah, a piece of it
oh.
broke off. I thought it was fake, honestly.
Hmm.
But anyway, let's see what Rotten Tomatoes
I
says.
mean, hey,
Let's see. The tomometer says 87%. The audience score says 88%. I'm saying they're both wrong personally, but
Yeah, that's. I was I was really hoping the audience score would be more like in the 60 range, but I don't know. Boy, howdy, is Rotten Tomatoes going to be in for a rude awakening when we qualify to be a critic reviewer.
how far do you guys have to go before you can be a critic reviewer?
One more year of this.
Oh,
You have
really?
2 years of consistently producing uh, media reviews, and then you can apply to be a Rotten Tomatoes critic.
Oh, nice.
So we're halfway there.
Well, cool.
well,
But uh, to kind of wrap things up, that's been The Searchers. Uh, Reid, it's been a pleasure having you with us. If you would like to share any kind of projects you got going on, things coming up, social media accounts, have at it.
I'm Reid Beaman, and you can find me on Facebook or on Instagram at Reid Beaman, and also at Reid Beaman Art. Currently, I have a comics project that I'm working on with my buddy Thomas Price. Hopefully, hopefully, it will be out in the next couple months. But that's all I can say about that. And I have a few other things that I'm working on, but I can't really announce that as of yet. So just check the social media out and for updates because I can announce it later on when that comes up.
It's fair enough. Jack, do you have anything else?
I got nothing.
Alrighty. Well, if you've enjoyed this show, or our conversation with Reid, go give him a follow. If you did like this particular episode, please leave a review. The stars do matter. If you want additional content from us, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Discord, YouTube under Armchair Commanders. We'd appreciate the support wherever you feel free to do that. Until next week, I've been John.
And I'm Jack.
I've been Reid.
And we will catch you later.
Bye. Oh, fuck it.